Hello, everyone, and welcome to the First Class Lacrosse podcast. My name is Matt Dunn, and today I am joined by my co-host, Deemer. We are thrilled to sit down with one of the pillars of our sport, Notre Dame head coach Kevin Corrigan. Coach Corrigan is entering his 38th season in South Bend, the longest tenured Division I men's lacrosse coach, and the architect behind the Irish's rise to the elite. Since taking over in 1988, he's guided Notre Dame to back-to-back national championships in 2023 and 2024 and amassed a 351 and 160 record. The 2024 team will be talked about for a long time. A 16-1 finish, ACC regular season and tournament titles, and a dominant NCAA run capped by a 15-5 win over Maryland. That season also produced the program's first Tewaaraton winner in Pat Cavanaugh, another finalist in Liam Entenmann, who repeated as National Goalie of the Year, and a program record 11 USILA All-Americans. Under Corrigan, the Irish have become a postseason fixture. 7 championship weekend appearances, 27 NCAA bids, and 13 quarterfinals in the last 15 seasons, while collecting 19 regular season conference titles and 5 tournament crowns. He also holds the NCAA Division I record for the most wins at a single school. Beyond the hardware, his impact shows up in the standard he's set. Player development, academic excellence, and a consistent ability to show up in the biggest moments.
We're thrilled to have you on the podcast. We have a ton of respect for, what you do and what you've built at Notre Dame. And, really excited to share some time together today. We thought a good opener would be to hear about the bagpipe tradition. How did that start? Where did that come from? And we'd love to hear more about it.
That I got to say, that is the least contrived thing of all time. We had a guy named Sean Meehan from Smithtown East who came, and when he was a freshman, the guys on the team found out he played the bagpipes, right? So our first game that year was at home in Loftus, and the guys were like, "Hey, coach, Sean plays the bagpipes, and he, what do you think if he let us out, before the game?" And I'm like, that sounds cool. Let's go with it, right? So we did it, and it was great. Guys got a big charge out of it and everything else, and Sean kind of like, he was reluctant. He didn't want this to become a thing. And so our next game was away over spring break. We were gone for 10 days, and he intentionally left the pipes behind. But the guys, snuck them on the trip anyway, and told me right before the game. They said, "Hey, Coach, Sean's going to tell you he forgot the pipes, but we've got them. We're here." So right before the game, I'm like, "All right, Sean, you got the pipes. You going to lead us out?" He's like, "Coach, I forgot." And I'm like, "Hey," and the guys are like, "No, hey, Sean, here they are. We got them." So that was it. I mean, from that point on, somebody has let us out to the pipes. And Sean made a VHS tape when he was done that got passed down a couple generations and iterations of how to play the bagpipes, and that went with the first few players. Chad DeBolt really is the guy that deserves a lot of credit for picking up the mantle and teaching himself to play the bagpipe, right? And it's one of those extraordinary things when you think about like how busy people get things done, right? Chad played 4 years of lacrosse and 4 years of football over 5 years, and graduated with a degree in engineering and an MBA, and taught himself to play the bagpipe in his free time, right? So always give work to the busy guy.
I always would have thought that this was a much more historic tradition that was like grounded in something, something very, I don't know, a traditional that Notre Dame as an institution believed it or something. I had no idea it was so random, if you will.
Yeah. No, I probably need to come up with a better story than that, don't I? I should harken back to years of Rockney and everything else with something. But no, it's pure locker room silliness, really, that got it started, and that's how these things go.
That kind of makes it, I don't know, makes it cooler to me. That's like, it's pretty hilarious, actually, that's how simple it was off the start. And my understanding also is that the end of each year, the previous year's bagpiper, or what, I don't know, probably not the name, leaves the bagpipes in a player's locker, and that player assumes responsibility for the next year.
That's it. They've been designated when they find the pipe in their locker.
I also understand they're not that easy to learn how to play.
I can't imagine they are. Jeez. And we've had some guys who made it look really hard. we
Yeah,
but we've had a lot of guys who take a lot of pride in it and want to make sure that if they only know one song, they know 45 seconds of one song that they can knock out at any time.
that's awesome. We want to loop back into a lot of the stuff you've done at Notre Dame, the program. Deemer and I obviously have both competed against you over the years, and have a ton of respect for the program, all the players that have gone through and what you've done there. But first, we did want to loop back a little to your background. And, you come from a sports family. Your dad was a coach. You're one of 7, I believe, and a family that's deeply involved in sports. I'm wondering if you can talk about maybe your upbringing. And I believe your dad coached, at least at one point, 3 sports at UVA, and what it was like for you growing up as a child of a 3-sport coach, I believe soccer, basketball, and lacrosse at one point at Virginia.
Yeah, he took that job in August, and I came along in December of 1958. So yeah, that was how things were, right? People talk about college sports now and all the changes and everything else. Well, think about the changes of where we've come from. That was the University of Virginia, with one guy, no full-time assistant coaches, and that was that was what he was doing in soccer and lacrosse, and he was the assistant coach in basketball. But at that time, the assistant coach also had to coach the freshman team, because there was a full-on freshman team at that time too. So it was crazy. And in fact, he missed my birth because he was coaching a freshman basketball game. A guy that we got to know over the years, Lou Farina, used to love telling me that story that he was playing while I was being born, freshman team. But no, so it was a great way to grow up. I mean, it really was kind of Norman Rockwell. We were 7 kids. You came home from school and your mother closed the door and said, "No, I want to see you until dinner time." And you went out and ran around the neighborhood with everybody. And there were a lot of days where I went straight to my dad's practices, right? And whatever he was doing, I'd go over and hang around the sidelines and do whatever. Back in those days, I was in charge of putting the popsicle sticks in the gut walls of the guys' sticks, because they have, after practice, they used to try to keep their best sticks in good shape, right? And so just a lot of funny little memories like that of growing up around sports, and then it wasn't just my dad's practices. I'd go to over the years, he then became an athletic director, and I would go to, you could go to watch Terry Holland coach, basketball at UVA, and or a plethora of other great coaches, that were doing their thing there. So it was definitely the thing that had our family. We were all active in that, but loved being around sports all the time. And my dad's brothers were all involved in coaching in some way, even if it was just on the side. It's funny. Like, I grew up, I come out here to the Midwest, and one of my first things when I get out here in '88 is to go up into Chicago and try to meet some alums that had started the club team here and all that. And I meet these guys at a Chicago lacrosse event, and they're like, "Oh yeah, your Uncle George started the Chicago Lacrosse Club when he was living in Chicago selling advertising back in the '60s." And I was like, what are the odds, right? But that's just kind of how it was. That was our thing.
Did you ever not consider coaching? Was there a time that you were thinking about getting into something else?
I totally thought I wanted to get into business, because I really thought I wanted to be rich. That was my big plan. But when I was when I was in college and I started working camps and stuff, I just loved coaching. I loved trying to help somebody learn how to do something. They got great satisfaction and contentment of helping somebody do something that they were trying to master, or get better at, and I just really enjoyed that process of doing that. And that was even without the team aspect of it that you get into when you get into college coaching and that stuff. So I quickly decided that was something that I was going to do, and really enjoyed it. And God knows I took a 180 from making money into not, I mean, the money that I made. I'm not exaggerating to say that for the first probably 10 years of my career, I was under the poverty line significantly, but couldn't have cared less. I was doing what I wanted to do and having fun with it, and that was good enough.
I think those pieces are so interesting because a lot of coaches have the story about their first coaching job, especially college lacrosse, and the coaches of the generation now, where at the point college lacrosse was, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you traveled out to South Bend, Indiana, when I believe you were 29 years old to take the coaching job at Notre Dame. And there wasn't, TV deals, there wasn't the internet, travel wasn't as easy to get all the way or all around to all these places. So I'm wondering if you can almost take us back to what that was like, starting that program, making that decision to go there, to Notre Dame after, I believe you were an assistant at UVA after you graduated, and kind of stayed on the East Coast for a little while.
Yeah, I'd coached at Randolph-Macon for a few years, and then was back at UVA as an assistant and all that. But listen, the world was a different place. I mean, the phone was attached to a cord in the wall, that you weren't going any farther than about 5 feet from the phone if you wanted to continue the conversation. There was no computers on anybody's desks. Computers took up rooms at that point, for the most part. There was, you say, no internet or anything like that. There was no easy way to do a lot of the things that we do now. But you had to do the job. You had to go out and watch players and evaluate players, and then reach out to them and connect with them and try to get them to your school, right? So the essence of the job didn't change, but a lot of the logistics certainly did. That's for sure. I remember the first few years I was out here, we didn't have a budget that allowed me to fly, right? And our team couldn't fly, and we couldn't afford to fly. So we used to bus back, we'd bus back to Baltimore for a weekend game. And then, in the summers when I was out recruiting, I just packed my car full of stuff and drove around for 2 months, because I couldn't, there was only so many trips back and forth from South Bend that I was going to make, and so when coaches talk about how important their wives are, to their success, it's more than just talk. I mean, if you don't have somebody who's willing to kind of dig in and help you do the things that you need to do, right? And she's there, she's left with the kids, and doing the things that have to be done for our family, while I'm out running around, talking to other people's kids, trying to get them to come to Notre Dame, right? And it takes a special kind of person to do that. And so I think those of us who got lucky there really got lucky.
That's a really interesting point, and I feel like I've heard that a lot, and I think that also transcends coaching, but also business, entrepreneurial ventures, like people who are making a lot of sacrifice, and then their partner making that sacrifice with them, and really going through all the ups and downs together, the tough practices, the tough losses, that really resonates, because it's very consuming, I think, to be a college coach and sacrifice a lot of time on the road, and like you said, so it's a really interesting point.
Yeah, we all talk about passion and what a wonderful thing it is and everything else, but like you're saying, it can go too far, and or at least it can make things really difficult for you at times, because you're consumed by this thing, and as my wife would say to me a lot, back in the day, and still does at times, like, hey, you're here, but you're not really here. Like, you're sitting over there in your own little world kind of thing, or and that's when you're there, right? That's supposed to be the good. So it's a really hard thing to do, and to do well is to try to be present for your family and do all those things that you need to do to be a good father and a good husband and all that, but to still kind of have the drive and the passion and be consumed by what you do, and it's a balance that I think every person in any kind of job where it's not just like punch a clock and come in and do it, has to figure out for themselves, right? And that's something you and your partner have to figure out, but it's not easy, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So Coach, you grow up in a sports family, you make the move in 1988 to Notre Dame. You marry the right woman that allows you to pursue your dream and manage the craziness that is college coaching. And you're entering your 38th year at Notre Dame right now.
I married her after the first year here, and I've been dating her in Virginia. She came out and she said, "Hey, you got 3 years to win some games and get us the hell out of here." And so 38 years later, here we are, right?
You hit the 3-year window and you're like, one more year.
And then at one point when I went to look at a job, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go talk to these people. You know, I won't say who it was, but I'm going to go talk to them. This is interesting. It's a job I've always thought would be a great job and everything else." And she's like, "Well, we're going to miss you." And okay.
This is home now. Yeah.
So
one thing I want to make sure that we hit, because, you know, Deemer and I talking about things we wanted to cover. This is something that we're just super curious about. Notre Dame, like once again, we've both played against Notre Dame. A lot of respect we know a lot of the players that have come through. A lot of your guys have had great professional careers. Players that, you know, they're talented, but your program has done a great job of developing them as well. And Notre Dame has a certain style of play. And obviously that's changed. Lacrosse has changed over the last decade, and probably every decade it changes. So it's a little different than what it looked like maybe 10 years ago when we were playing you, but I think some things are still the same. One thing that I'm particularly curious about is the defensive side of the ball at Notre Dame. I think it's been an identity for the program for a long time, and you've had great defensive coordinators, you have great defensive players come through, but it's my understanding that some of the basic fundamental principles were ones that you instilled or really believed in early on. And from a defensive coach's perspective, I'm curious maybe where you got your background in coaching defense, where you learned from, and what was really important to you on that side of the ball early on in developing the core standards of what a Notre Dame defense is all about.
Well, I guess the thing I'll start with there is a couple of very fundamental things, and fundamental being the operative word. I grew up around all these coaches, right? And the ones that I admired were the ones that I thought taught their game, their sport, and the fundamentals really well, so that everybody had a baseline of you know, sort of, it kept everybody from dipping below a certain level because they were really sound fundamentally, right? And that to me was always like, all right, that's a really good coach who can set the floor. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to go below this except on a, you know, rare occasion, right? Be very consistent at a certain level. Secondly, defense is so much less about talent, so much more about knowledge and understanding and decision making and fundamentals and execution of simple things than it is about having some great skill like scoring the ball, you know, or that kind of stuff, right? And so as we were starting to build the first teams out here, it just made sense for us to start at the defensive end, right? We may not have as much talent, but we had a lot of great kids who were hardworking and willing and communicated well, you know, and you know, we used to say to them all the time, "Hey, we know we got smart kids. You guys go, you know, when I first got here, you guys all got yourselves in Notre Dame. You're really smart kids. You're not necessarily smart lacrosse players, but we can fix that because you're smart kids and you're willing and you love this and we can turn that into smart lacrosse players, right?" And so I think that's how we kind of started with the defensive identity, if you will, right? You know, I think if you look at our teams over the last bunch of years, we play good offense. You know, before the shot clock, there was a funky, you know, 5 to 10 years there before we got to the shot clock, right? Where the game was just nosediving, in my opinion. It was terrible to watch. It was terrible to coach. It was terrible to play. Comparatively, I'm saying to what it is now, because now there's action, there's forced action. Prior to that, everybody just played that way. Nobody thought about stalling and holding the ball and shooting over the goal to, you know, to satisfy some requirement, you know what I mean? And all those kinds of things that happened for a period of time and really it just made our game really just not as good as what it is now. Right. And so during those years, like, we would love to have coached more aggressive offense. The problem was we played really good defense. And if we played aggressive offense at that time with really good defense, that meant that at the end of the game, they had the ball for 45 minutes and you had the ball for 15 minutes and you were still supposed to outscore them. And that was really hard to do. It was really hard to marry those two things that, hey, we play really good defense. So people take their time. They can take their time. They could have 2 and 3 minute possessions at that time. Right. And they would. And you're like, all right, well, we can't come down and have a 15-second possession after we just played 3 minutes of defense and then expect that our defense is going to hold up over the course of the day. So again, that kind of fed into that. All right, well, we got to keep this defensive identity. And I thought a false narrative that we weren't willing to play faster offensively. We just couldn't. We couldn't in the games as they were constructed. We couldn't do that and be successful. So we had to slow down offensively, which I didn't particularly like. I never did. I love the way we play now comparatively, much more aggressive and much more assertive offensively, because we know we're going to get the ball back, and we're not going to end up with this terrible disparity. I still think, this is off topic a little bit. To me, that's still the problem with the faceoff. The faceoff is the one thing that still allows for that disparity. What other sport do the teams not have equal number of possessions, equal number of outs, and equal number of possessions in every other sport? In our sport, you can have a disparity of, 15, 20 possessions based on the faceoff. That's crazy. How are you supposed to beat a team? So a team can do one thing well and make it really, really difficult for you to beat them. I like the game. I like the sport where it's the overall play of the whole team that makes more of a difference than what one guy can do.
And it feels like a lot of your coaching, and you mentioned it, your influences come from other sports, right? Your foundational principles, you would watch basketball practice, go to football practice, and these things. And so, like,
I still do. I've been to in the last month, I've been to both basketball and football practices here. I've reached out to a couple coaches. I'm dying to go down and see Rick Carlisle, who's a UVA guy who's coaching down at Indy, and dying to go down there and watch him and his staff work and see what they do, because I just admire how his teams play and how well coached they are. Done the same thing with Tom Izzo and Coach K and John Calipari and all these guys are so different, right? They all are so effective coaching, but the way their teams play and the personality that they bring to what they do is also different. So, certainly, one thing you got to always remember is you got to be authentic. You can learn and steal from everybody out there, but you better be authentic to who you are, because that's what works for the best people.
The idea of going to other sports practices, as well as, even for myself, when I've gotten to watch other coaches coach, you pick up so much, right? And you've been coaching for a long time. When you go to these practices, what kind of lens do you try to take? Like, what are you trying to learn? Are you just stepping back and observing everything? Or are there certain things that you try to really cue in on as to how that coach operates?
It really is a little bit of everything, right? I want to see how they talk to their team about the last game or the next game. I want to see how their assistant coaches are woven into how things get done, right? I mean, in football, it's all the assistant coaches doing the actual coaching, right? And the head coach is kind of orchestrating, right? In basketball, a lot of times it's the head coach doing everything, and the assistant coaches on the side, doing things individually with guys much more. And so I'm looking to see that communication between the staffs. I'm looking to see how different coaches and everyone on the staff communicates with kids, right? I mean, again, be authentic to who you are. I can't go out there and be this quiet, guy. Like, I went and watched Tony Bennett coach his team, and I'm like, man, that guy's an impressive coach. He does amazing things. He gets his guys to play the way he wants them to play and make decisions and all that. But if I tried to be Tony Bennett, I think my head would pop off, right? Because I don't deal with the world in the same way he does, right? And not that doesn't change my admiration for him and what he does, but I just can't do it. Although there's things I can learn from him, that the sense of calm and confidence that he brings to his team, in the way that he does do things. So there's just so much that you can learn. And then watching other teams interact with each other, just the teams themselves, right? And you're constantly learning about that dynamic. I don't think you ever, we all want to have the finger on the pulse of our team, right? But you don't ever completely understand all the inner dynamic workings of your team and all of that. So that's a constant work in progress. You're trying to figure out, and what does that look like? Because I tell you what, I watched Bob Huggins when he came here a few years ago. He's coaching at Cincinnati. And I'm like, that guy looks like a maniac. He's going crazy. And then I sit behind their bench for the game. He's yelling at his players. They're yelling at him. The assistant coach is yelling at him. He's yelling back. They're going crazy the whole time. That's what they do every day. That looks like crazy time to us, because that's not how we're doing things. But you realize at some point that's just they're just communicating. That's how they do it. They must do that way every day in practice and everything else. So it's no big thing for that. It's not, a coach barking back at or a player barking back at a coach would be sign of a terrible disrespect in a lot of places. On that team in that moment, it didn't mean that. It just meant he had a different opinion that he was trying to share, and that's how they did it, So I don't know. I just, a lot of ways to skin the cat out there, guys. And so I love watching how other people do it and seeing if I can't pick up just one little thing every time I go to something like that.
Yeah, I think the authenticity piece is, a note that I just took down there, and it's just such a great reminder. And, I want to get into some of that with, the state of athletes today and a little later in the show. But circling back, you mentioned fundamentals, Matt asked about defense, and then obviously, like, I'm always thinking about offense too. And, I'm curious, again, the style changed. You kind of talked about the shot clock and the rules evolving, but you talked about this, aggressiveness your offenses are playing with today. We're seeing a ton of creativity. And I think of guys like not just the Kavanaughs, but Ryder Garnsey, who, has certainly defied what fundamentals look like in a way, and so, like, how has that challenged you to evolve as a coach? How have you dealt with that when you have some of this insane, world level talent that are doing things that, are not the ways you're always teaching guys to catch and throw? Like, how have you navigated that as you've evolved?
Well, I think one part of it is my appreciation for something that I think is incredibly important in our game, and that's creativity. I think it's a game that allows for a lot of creativity. Any fluid sport, right? That football doesn't have as much creativity, right? And it's really the quarterback who's that one guy who can be creative. Everybody else, do your job, stay in your lane, do your job, right? That kind of thing. Football, it has one guy that can be creative for the most part. In lacrosse, everybody can be, right? And everybody can do things their own way. So yeah, you do have to kind of sometimes bite your tongue. I remember when Ryder came here, everybody's like, "Oh my God, him and Corrigan will kill each other. They're gonna," and it's like, no, it's ridiculous. Like, I knew who we recruited. I didn't want to. I wanted him to learn what a good decision was and a bad decision was. I wasn't as concerned about whether he threw it behind the back or one-handed or whatever. If he practiced and did those things well, I didn't want to see something for the first time in a game that flew into the back net, because he didn't know what he was doing, but if he plays that way every day and he works on those things and then in the moment he's allowed to be creative and instinctual, all the better as a lacrosse player, in my opinion. Right. So yeah, there's that balance, right? You've got to have a balance between discipline and fundamentals and playing in a way that people around you can understand. Because one of the things that you do have a problem with, and Ryder, I thought this was one of the things he really grew as a player while he was here, was when he got here, he could do the same things he could do 2 years later, but nobody knew what the heck he was going to do. And so it kind of froze everybody else, and learning to play in a way that everybody else can understand. So you have some predictability so that they can understand the decisions they have to make to be a good offensive player. Right. There's all of that, right? There's all finding those balance and all those things, Deemer.
I think to the same point, I was thinking, obviously there's creativity all over the field in lacrosse, but not everybody's the quarterback and not everybody's the ball carrying attackman or the inside finishing attackman, the Jake Taylor, the ability, a close defender, for example, probably doesn't have the same creative license to do what they please on the ball as maybe the ball carrier who's proven. So I guess it's a tension that I feel like a lot of coaches have of, you hear defensively or offensively, but a lot of times defensively, it's, hey, don't throw checks, but be disruptive and do like, You mentioned fundamentals as setting the floor. How do you think about that creative discipline side of it with your defensive personnel?
Well, let's talk about this too. 20 years ago, we taught one-on-one defense a lot differently because you could put the ball on the ground 20 years ago. Now you can land a perfect check and the ball doesn't go anywhere. So it doesn't make sense to throw checks when you're only going to land. Let's say you're great and you're going to land 4 out of 5. And if only one of those 4 is going to put the ball on the ground, now you're 1 out of 5. That's a lousy percentage, and that's a bad defense. So you can't take those chances like you used to. You can't do some things that you used to be able to do. The sticks, the whatever, the skill level all combined to make that a different. You have to play it differently now than you did at that time, right? I mean, so I think if you ever watch Jerry Byrne play lacrosse and you ever watch Jerry Byrne coach lacrosse, you would see 2 different cats.
He's not the only one too. There's a lot of it. I don't think Coach Petramala is teaching it the same way that the highlights that I've seen of him,
Yeah, you think about the things that Dave would do and yeah, that's not what he's teaching now because it just doesn't work.
Building off that from my point of view, like you were talking about, helping, the decision making for the offensive players of when to do those things and what's good versus bad. When I think about Matt Landis, Sean Light, like these guys, they'll take some of those chances, maybe at times, but they're very calculated, and they're within what you guys have been doing. So, even if they land that one, it's much more calculated or the certain part of the field, and so, you kind of see just the element overall of how important time and place of making these different decisions is to have success.
No doubt about it. And listen, you're always coaching to your personnel, so everybody doesn't have the same rules. That would be silly because everybody doesn't have the same ability and everybody doesn't have the same style and everything else. So the rules are different for some guys in some instances, but by and large, you're right.
Hey everyone, Matt here. We wanted to take a quick second to pause and talk about our SCL online coaches community. We started the community because we're obsessed with coaching and with learning from people who've shaped the game. Coaches have had a huge impact on both Deemer and myself, and building a place where we could hear from top college coaches and apply their ideas right away felt like the obvious next step. The webinars, the drills, the teaching frameworks, they've helped us coach with more clarity, and they've become a great resource for full staffs who want to stay aligned. If you want something that keeps you sharp throughout the year, you can look at firstclasslax.com/community. That's firstclasslax.com/community, or you can find the link in our description below. Now back to our conversation.
We're kind of talking about your dad's, upbringing and like his coaching and, back in the day, people were coaching multiple sports. People don't have the assistant bandwidth that, maybe you do now, but even today, like 45 guys on the team, 50 guys on the team, and you've got 4 coaches, like you still have to be very resourceful. From an outsider's view, I feel like I've seen you be very involved in all parts of the game, how do you approach, not just being a defensive minded or offensive minded, but you've been seemingly pretty involved in a lot of facets of your team's play as a head coach.
One of the things that I'm absolutely certain, I don't talk to him about it because it would be a conversation that went nowhere. But I'm sure that it drives my assistant coaches crazy at times because I will step in and override them on something or you know what I mean? Or say, all right, tell me what you're thinking. This is what I'm thinking. All right, we're going to do it this way. And that's, now let's go do it. We're not going to discuss it more after we've made a decision. Right. And I think you can't be afraid of making decisions and doing that stuff. Right. And then add that to the fact that I feel like, all right, do I want to substitute someone else's judgment for mine? Right. And after 40 something years of coaching, there are situations where I certainly do. I say, yeah, okay, you're right. I think I like what you're talking about better. But ultimately, that's kind of my judgment too, is saying your idea is better than my idea. But we're going to do it because I said we're going to do that, not because it was your idea. That drives assistant coaches crazy sometimes because they think they've got, and they do. They're grown ass men. They got valued opinions that are hard fought and hard earned by them. And so that's that might be a real flaw, quite honestly, in my coaching. But it's also, again, authentically, that's who I'm going to be. I have spent an awful lot of time. I'm 67 years old right now. And I grew up going to lacrosse practice from the time I was 3 and 4 years old. I mean, I don't know anybody on my staff that has that many years in the game that has been around it that way. And so it doesn't mean that I don't value their opinion and that I don't respect them, because that would be the farthest thing from the truth. But it does mean that when it's time to make a decision, I'm comfortable making the decision, and then even looking back and going, all right, well, that was the wrong decision, but I was comfortable making it.
Being around the game for a long time, and you're a lifelong learner, and you go watch other sports and you're doing everything you can to keep learning. Are there some things that coaches have brought to the table, whether it's, I think of Coach Byrne was there for a long time, and Coach Wellner has been there for a while, and you have Coach Wojcik, Coach Garnsey, Ryder now. Are these coaches, are there things that you remember that some of those guys have brought to the table that have changed the way you've seen some of your philosophy and coaching styles?
I'd be hard pressed to think of a coach that worked with me for more than one season that didn't have a profound impact on what I think. Absolutely. I mean, again, I'm to your point, I'm trying to learn all the time. I don't mistake confidence and commitment to a certain way of doing things for an arrogance that says, I know the right way to do things and I know what the right answer is all the time. I don't, but somebody has to make a decision. And if you're handing that off half the time and doing it half the time and everything else, then there's a lot of confusion. My thing is, let's make, we know where the decisions are going to come from. Let's talk about it and we'll get on with it. But I'm always influenced by the guys that coach with us. I've learned from every guy that's been here. I've learned things. So, yeah, I hope I continue to do that, because when I start thinking I've got all the answers in it, it's for damn sure that I'm in trouble.
No, I really appreciate the realness to that, because I think, whether it's my time as an assistant or even now as, Matt and I were trying to make decisions for our business, like there's a lot of hard things that constantly come up. And then again, I can only imagine as a head coach, things that you don't get always prepared for as an assistant coach. But like you said, the buck stops at some point. You're the face of the program and you've got to make those tough decisions and live with the consequences and evolve and move forward. And I would like to transition that a little bit where, I heard on, I think it was the podcast with your cousin recently, where you're, talking about the changes in athletes and with their experience, and it's evolving. In today's game, and coaches talk about how athletes are changing over the generations. Like, can you still coach hard? And what's the same about athletes, that when you first started, as you've evolved your philosophies?
When I first got into coaching, and I think for a long, long time, coaching was the idea that everybody that showed up to practice was giving you permission, to do whatever you wanted to do, and that they were going to follow you and do whatever you said to do. Now, I think you have to, you do what you do. And I say this to our team now. I say, look, I'm hard, and I'm going to be hard on you. I'm going to be demanding. I'm going to hold you accountable at times when you don't want to be held accountable. But it's all in the interest of you being a better player and us being a better time. And if you ever think I cross that line, come talk to me about it, because I don't have any intention of crossing a line there. But I do believe in somebody else can get more out of you than you can get out of yourself in most instances, right? And so I do believe in that ability to do that. And so I think if we can do that and create a culture where everybody does that and expects that of each other, then that happens. But as I say to the team all the time, is I do this with your permission. Like I can't coach the way I coach unless you guys allow me to. And if you spit the bit every time I'm hard on you, then that's not allowing me to do my job. That's not in the way that I'm doing it, right? And we either need to have a conversation and figure out what's going on, or make an adjustment somewhere. One of us has to change, right? Because if not, we're just gonna. It doesn't do any good to butt heads. I can't go out there and feel like I'm pushing rope every day to get guys, to do what I want them to do. And they can't go out there and feel like they're getting the whip all day, for doing what they think they're supposed to be doing. So there's got to be a balance. And like I say, every coach finds that balance in a different way. And, some coach, listen, one of the things I tell our coaches too, our players too, is like, hey, I coach really loud for two reasons. But the biggest one is that I don't want to have to teach every single guy the same lesson, right? Because if I do, that means if I teach a midfielder one thing, that I have to go back and reteach that 19 times so that all our midfielders know how to do that. If I coach it loud and everybody sees it and demonstrably, then 19 guys can learn from one guy's mistake, or from one guy's great play. They can all learn something from that. And that's the environment that I want to have, where everybody's kind of, got their eyes open. And guys, every time a guy gets, criticized or coached hard or something, he's not, dragging his head, and guys around him aren't going, oh, that's really unfair. That's, it's like, hey, no, it's not. We're just trying to get to where we're trying to get to. And like I said, you can do it like Tony Bennett. You can do it like Bob Huggins. I think both of those guys were great coaches on the court, right? And they had different ways of doing it. And I don't know. Again, their players, each of their players said, yeah, this is what I signed up for. This is what I'm in for. And you're not crossing a line with me that we haven't agreed upon. I think that's really important. And I don't think that's changed. I don't, you know what I mean? The difference is that a generation ago, when your parents dropped you off at practice, that was permission to basically do whatever I wanted. Now the players, they have more say. Their relationship with adults is different. Their relationship with their parents is different, right? I mean, we just, there are so many things that are different about the way kids grow up now. But I also, in some ways, everybody laments what it's not. Okay. But what it is kids with so much more knowledge, who are empowered to make so many more decisions, but also have the pressure that comes from a very early age with making decisions that we were never confronted with in the same way. And like it's all out there. It's all part of the mix. And do I think people are different? No, I think circumstances are vastly different, and relationships are vastly different than they used to be. So that makes it different.
I think a lot of coaches want to coach hard. I honestly think a lot of coaches, and maybe young coaches, and they're kind of afraid to, because they're maybe afraid of breaking that connection with the player. You're kind of living on both ends a little bit, where you're entering a fragile state and you're not sure how the player is going to take it, and if you can really have a strong enough base to get through that. Do you think now, as players are more curious and they have more opinions, that the ability to coach hard is solidified by extra time in different domains, connecting with the player more, maybe having conversations that aren't lacrosse related? Like, how do you establish that foundation so that that when you get on player A for whatever on the field and you hold them accountable, because that's the standard and that's how you do it, that's not going to send them off in a spiraling direction, but they know there's this foundation behind it.
Yeah, there's no question. It's relationship based, right? And there has to be trust. And if they don't trust, first thing, they have to trust that you have their best interest in mind, right? If everything's about you, then I think you have a much harder time, coaching people hard, because it's not about you. It's about them, and it's about your team. And so, it's you have to have that trust that they believe in what you're doing is good for them. And yeah, that comes in a lot of different ways. And maybe that's one of the advantages of being at a place for a long time is there is a little bit of a culture of, hey, look, coach is going to be the first guy that's going to help you get a job, and he's going to be the first guy that's going to introduce you to alumni for 4 years and help you, form a network of people that can help you. And he's going to be the first guy that's going to, be there if something happens to you or your family or you in your health. And I was laughing the other day about, but when my son, Will, he was home for Thanksgiving, and we were laughing about when he was little, when guys got hurt, back in the day, when they got hurt, And especially if they got operated on for something, they went to the infirmary here on campus. And after they left the hospital, they spent a night or two in the infirmary here on campus. And that was part of the reentry thing. And I would always take the kids over, and we'd bring them a milkshake over in the health center to just like something silly, but just a way to say, hey man, sorry what you're going through, but also, the kids are here and they don't really know what's going on. And maybe that kind of helps you a little bit, put this all in perspective, that life's going to keep going on. You're going to overcome this. It's not the end of anything. And just to build on a little bit of that, but that's forming relationships. And maybe after you've been at a place for 38 years, there's some of that residual, build up on some of that stuff can help you. And guys are willing to maybe give you the benefit of the doubt until they see that relationship for themselves.
I remember, I think it was maybe 2 years ago now, or maybe it was last winter when you got honored at the gala in New York. And it was really cool to see how many generations of alumni like showed up for you there, to be a part of that night, and, to kind of hear, how you're weaving and building the culture. It's really cool to hear. And so I guess, my question would be, how would you define the culture of Notre Dame lacrosse? What is it today, and how has it evolved?
Yeah, that's such a hard question, because, culture is not the things that you have hanging on the wall and the platitudes that you spout at different times. I mean, it is partly that, right? Because that helps set a certain environment and everything else. But culture is the everyday living of the experience, right? And what does it feel like to be part of that? What is important, right? And how are those things made to be important? And is there a hierarchy of things or whatever? And all of those things, come together. I hope that what our players leave with is that if you're really passionate about something and you're willing to work at it, and you're willing to come to that from a place of gratitude and humility, right? Which I think is a hugely, hugely important thing, because gratitude is just such an important thing, to there's no entitlement when there's gratitude, right? There's nobody expects to be given something. They're just grateful for all the things that they have, and they appreciate, all the people, and you're a better teammate when you have gratitude, because the people are around you, you understand that they're all part of your success, and you're part of their success. And but it also, gratitude doesn't mean there's no challenges. It just means that sometimes within the challenges, you're looking for the things to be grateful for, and sometimes the challenge itself is the thing to be grateful for, because it helps you grow. And so, I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to get to all the time, right? Is developing a culture that doesn't just help us win lacrosse games, but like, to me, the most important thing is that it helps these guys, yes, by learning to be a better lacrosse team, hopefully we can learn to be better at the job that we ultimately choose to do, better at being members of our community, and living up to the responsibilities and that we should have there, that we should seek there, being a better father and husband, because we know how to trust people, and we know that listen, there's no easy thing out there. There's just, winning is hard, and so is pretty much everything else. You know what I mean? I mean, listen, my dad, who I am still convinced had one of the great marriages of all time. I remember when I was getting married, he told me, he said, "Hey, Kev, being married is the hardest thing you'll ever do." Like, and I'm one of 7 kids. I thought my parents had like Hollywood story, and they did. That didn't mean it wasn't hard. You know what I mean? And he wanted me to understand that, like that. And that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It does mean that you don't give up. You don't bow every time something gets difficult, because everything's going to be difficult to an extent, right? And so when you talk about culture, it's all those things, right? It's all those things. But it starts with a love and a passion and a trust and an accountability and a feeling that you're gaining from what you're putting in. You're gaining something back and gratitude for that.
Going on the culture piece, and I think you said a few things there, and I've heard you say this before, and you can't define coaching success based off wins and losses. And I really I think you talked about it's a make or miss game. It might have been a Coach Van Gundy basketball quote. I lost a college championship in overtime, and for a while I'm not mature enough to. You think there's something more to that than if we had a shot that hit the goalie in the chest, where if that was 3 inches to the left, maybe it's a totally different story. And it's hard to wrap your head around success not being based off the outcome. And I think about, your journey to getting to building success. I believe the 2010 national championship, you guys lose one in overtime. You get to 2022, don't make the tournament for a while, and then you back-to-back repeat in 23, 24. I'm wondering what that ride was like, even the point of that culture piece you talk about and navigating the ups and downs of not making the tournament, winning a championship, and then having to repeat again, which many people say is one of the hardest things in sports because it's so easy to ride the wave of how you're doing and how things are going. How did that culture come into play in moments like that?
Again, I think it's just you've got to have some kind of core beliefs and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. And you can't be affected too much by wins and losses. Now, if you're not winning consistently, then you're not doing something well. That's pretty fundamental. But I remember Pat Kavanaugh and I had a conversation when he had first gotten here, and he's like, we made the tournament like 15 years in a row, and he's like, like there's not many programs out there. In fact, we might have been the only one at that time who had done that, and he's like, like at that time, not ever, obviously, but he's like, what would you rather do that, or would you rather make the tournament 7 times and win one national championship? And I'm like, well, I'd rather make 15 straight tournaments and have a chance and have every one of those teams have had a chance to win a championship than to have 7 teams that didn't have a chance to win a championship and one that actually won it. And I think we would probably still argue that point today, him and I. I'm glad we got to experience the both in a sense, but it's tough. I mean, it can't all be result oriented, but there is an accountability to the results, right? I mean, we're in a competitive environment, and somebody wins and somebody loses every single day, and you can't be on the losing side of too many of those. But in the process that you're setting up, and the process that you're trying to enact, that again, that you hope is something that has enough transitive property to move on and help them in their lives in a lot of ways, that can't be based on the result. That has to be based on your values and what you're trying to get out of it and why you're in the game and everything else, right?
Well, and I think that it connects too, because I actually got a quick story from Eric Dobson, who I've gotten to know over the years, and he referenced a point where you guys had just won the 2023 championship. You're doing one of your Euro tours that you guys have been doing for a long time now. And, they're not playing up to standards against maybe the Netherlands, and you get on these guys, and you give it to them. And, I think kind of what you're saying is like, you kind of have your fabric and your standards, and regardless of whether it's winning a championship or not making the playoffs or making the playoffs 15 years in a row, like you're going to hold these guys to these standards and keep demanding that excellence regardless of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that well. And I remember, like we basically go over on these trips and the whole idea is to have fun and enjoy ourselves and be together and celebrate, whatever, like I say, gratitude for all the different things that we've had, whether it's a championship or not. But also I tell them, like, hey, we got 2 rules, be on time and don't play slapdick lacrosse. When we play lacrosse, you have to play hard, because that's who we are. That fundamentally, that's who we are and what we do. And if you're not doing that, then that to me is like the canary in the coal mine of telling me that there's a lot of other stuff that we're not doing, right? If you can't pull it together to play hard and play good sound lacrosse the way we believe in and practice all the time, then there's other things that I don't know about that you're not doing, right? And so I'm going to use that as my barometer while we're on these trips of you making good decisions, representing yourself and your teammates well and your family well and all that. And if I can trust one, I think I can trust the other, so yeah, that's a we did. I kind of dressed them down a little bit, and they're kind of looking at me like, "World, are you?" I'm not sure if that message got through quite as articulately as I may have just said it just now.
Coach, I got one final question here, and kind of off a little more random than some of the prior ones, but certainly one that's very top of mind these days when you look at college athletics. A lot, and talking about how different it is from when your dad was coaching to now, and then your son Will is a coach, and so how different it might be in the next few decades. College sports has changed a lot in the last 5 years or so, from the NIL to transfer portal, some of the settlement stuff. I'm curious if you have any perspective on what's been different about college sports, and if you have any perspective on what you think the future of college lacrosse might look like, given some of these changes and what's been going on.
Ultimately, I'm optimistic that this is too good of a thing to go away, right? This college sports and all its iterations. Right now, we're all getting swallowed up by the tidal wave of football, right? I mean, everybody. And the world used to be separated. When I first got into coaching, the world was easily separated into revenue sports and non-revenue sports. And revenue sports were football and men's basketball, and everybody else was non-revenue sports. And then, they've changed all the vernacular and everything else, Olympic sports and all, whatever. It's still revenue and non-revenue and right now when it breaks down to it, right? But that doesn't mean that there's two things here. There's revenue and there's value. And I believe in the value proposition of what college athletics is. I believe in what it does for people. I believe in what it does for a university community. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think it's going to change. And I think maybe there's going to be challenges for coaches in recognizing, listen, no, you can't have a selfish team, right? There are not very many successful selfish teams. Maybe selfishness is going to look a lot different now, and the guy that's holding out for a little more money and everything else. But listen, guys, they do it in the pros. They figure it out, right? Those guys are purely mercenaries, in their careers. So I still believe that there's so much good in a successfully run college program, starting with the education as the fundamental basis of what it is, right? And everything that comes with that being on the campus community and everything else. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like there's an awful lot of good, and we're just going to find our way through it. I don't have any crystal ball or long-term answers, but I just don't believe that something as good as this is going to go away easily.
No, that's, I mean, nobody has a crystal ball. There's so many variables. It's even somebody, as well positioned as yourself to know it seems like there's so much at play. I think the reassuring thing is hearing that. And I know Deemer and I do what we do because of the great sport experiences we've had. We were lucky to have great coaches, and we believe in sports just about as much as anything, in particular team sports, where you have great coaches, and we spend almost every day with them for 4 years. And I think about stuff Coach Tillman used to say to us on a regular basis. And some of that stuff, I didn't even realize what it meant at the time. And I'm like, that was pretty good,
And the greatest responsibility that you have as a college coach is there are all these brilliant people all over our campus, right? And the voice that is going to leave in the heads of every kid that's on your team for 4 years is yours. It's not going to be that great professor. They may have some of that, but they're gonna have had that guy for a sum total of maybe 50 days in their college career if they took a couple courses from him, and they're going to have you for 30 days every month and for 4 years, and that's a lot, and that's a responsibility. I think that I know all the good coaches I know accept and appreciate what that responsibility is.
Yeah. And I think even tying that back to one thing you mentioned early on of like why you got into coaching, like that feeling that you can get for, being a small or big part of someone's journey and helping them grow and learn a skill, master a skill, achieve a goal. I know that is something I've reflected on a lot, and cool to hear you say that, because that feeling's hard to explain, but it's motivating and it's fulfilling when you're in any version of coaching.
No question. When I think back to the moments after winning the championship, and you don't know how you're going to react in that moment. You can't. It's not like something you've planned out. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? But when I think back to that, there's Jimmy Valvano running around the court and doing all that, or there's whatever, a million different reactions. My reaction was just to like, how cool is it to stand there and watch your guys just with this unbridled joy, just running around that field and hugging each other and dogpiling and the whole 9 yards. And you're like, that to me was like as good as it gets,
That's awesome. Well, Coach, we know you're a busy guy. We appreciate you hopping on today with us. This was awesome. It was fun catching up with you.
Yeah, man. Great to see you guys. We never did get a chance to talk about why you chose other schools, but that you have to live.
I think I chose, well, I don't want to say the reason I chose, but I also don't recall getting any email or letter or phone call. my number must have got lost in the mail or something.
I think Deemer lost my number too. I don't know.
I had to refind it a couple of years ago.
Deemer was a hotter commodity than I was.
Oh, no, Coach, we really appreciate it. We have so much respect, and it was fun competing against you over the years. And, it's been fun watching your team play and continue to compete. So looking forward to some great action in 2026, and, hope you have a great start to the season.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it. Good to be with you.